I'd like to welcome all of you. Thank the senators for your compelling arguments on the floor. The leader, thank you for being here. Women who represent organizations of individuals and members all across the nation. There are some anniversaries that you celebrate and some anniversaries that you grieve. This would be one of the latter. And there's no question that about a year ago, that the nation could take two directions in response to the Gosnell conviction. That is one that returns the humanity to this debate, or one that continues to divide our nation. What we just saw on the floor is a studying contrast. One that continues to divide, one that says there is no compromise, there is no common ground, there are never two people in the abortion decision, ever. And the other is a very modest, very reasonable legislation that Senator Graham has introduced. There's a reason that this is a wildly popular bill across the country, that 13 states have passed, that women more than men even support. It is because of the basic humanity of this bill and acknowledging that there are two individuals that deserve our loving care. The women on the floor of the Senate, who we respectfully disagree with, have it all wrong in the women's movement. They didn't hear the words of Alice Paul that have resounded through history that said, she was the original author of the Equal Rights Amendment. She said, abortion is the ultimate exploitation of women. And we certainly know that it is the end of life for the unborn child. This is a compassionate, reasonable, common ground way to begin to get to a place in America where we are not at odds all the time, where we're unified in a very beautiful way, in a way that shows compassion to unborn child and women. And so I want to thank you today, and I'm going to recognize Leader McConnell, because I know that he's got to get back to work. And thank you so much for being with us and your leadership.
Well, first, let me congratulate the leaders who are all around Senator Graham and myself for all the work that you've done on this extraordinarily important issue. And Senator Graham, thank you for stepping up and being our leader in the Senate. We've got 40 co-sponsors, which I think is extremely significant and a good starting place. Regardless of where you stand on the broader issue, we should all agree, all of us, that unborn children should be protected at least from the point that they're capable of feeling pain. The Senate ought to consider this bill. The majority leader, as we are learning over and over and over again, in case people around America didn't know it, sets the schedule, determines what we turn to, what the agenda is, what we vote on. He has obviously so far been unwilling to have a vote on this important measure by Senator Graham. Unfortunately, the way the current majority is running the Senate, and we've seen it on bill after bill, is that amendments from both sides are not allowed. Obviously, if we had a new majority leader, we'd have somebody new setting the agenda. And I'm proud to be a part of Senator Graham's legislation. I want to congratulate again everybody who's been involved in this. I think it's a very reasonable proposal with bipartisan support. I wish we had an opportunity to bring it up in the Senate and move ahead. Thank you so much.
I don't know anybody with a bigger heart than Senator Graham, and on this issue it comes to bear. Not only the heart for woman and child, but also the wisdom and the knowledge to navigate a bill like this in a Senate that is very hostile, led by a self-proclaimed pro-life senator, the one that we know from Nevada. I want to thank publicly Senator Graham's efforts, his strategic focus, and his ability to speak in an attractive way across all demographic lines, meaning Republican, Democrat, women and men, is an example of leadership that the pro-life movement should follow, and we aim to do that.
Thank you. Today is, I think, the anniversary of one of the Chamber of Horrors in American jurisprudence, Dr. Gosnell case, who was sentenced to life in prison, 3 counts of murder, 1 count of involuntary manslaughter, and many lesser counts. He's sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Well, what did he do? He ran an abortion clinic, that was aborting babies at the latest stages of the pregnancy. Babies survived the abortion procedure to only have their spinal cord severed. He called that ensuring fetal demise. It was something that the media didn't pay a lot of attention to, but thank God the courts did. And at the end of the day, a year after this case, we need to have some soul searching in America as to what is the proper role of government. Clearly, it was proper to put him in jail for life because he was killing babies at the latest stage of the delivery process, literally running a chamber of horrors. So what are we trying to do here? We're trying to ask the American people, through their elected representatives, for permission for our country to get out of a very select group of nations. In the entire world, there are 7 countries that allow elective abortions at the 20-week period and beyond. My goal is to make sure when this is over, there's 6. And we're in China, North Korea, Vietnam, Singapore, Canada, and the Netherlands. You add us, that makes 7. So I believe if the medical standard of care in 2014 is such that you cannot provide surgery to an unborn child at the 20-week period without administering anesthesia, the law has a compelling interest to protect the baby from wholesale abortion. So let me just say that again. If you're a doctor operating on an unborn child at the 5th month of the pregnancy, the 20-week period, you have to provide anesthesia. That's the standard of care expected of our physicians. And if you're going to tell doctors you got to provide anesthesia before you can operate to save the baby's life, do we really want to be killing the baby at that point in time during an abortion? And if you could just step aside there a little bit, this is what some of the more prominent medical journals tell young parents to do at 20 weeks. An unborn child can hear and respond to sounds. Talk or sing. The unborn child enjoys hearing your voice. So to America, if the medical standard of care for doctors is you can't operate without suppressing pain, and if you're telling young parents at this stage in the pregnancy, sing or talk because the child enjoys hearing your voice, should we have wholesale, unfettered abortions? Do we want to be in this club of 7? If we got a vote on the floor of the Senate, there would be bipartisan support for my idea. And the idea is fairly simple. At this stage of the pregnancy, and people have been born at 20 weeks or alive today, but the difference between medical viability under Roe v. Wade and this bill is that we're establishing a new legal theory to protect the unborn. And the legal theory goes like this. If you cannot operate without providing anesthesia and the child is capable of feeling extreme pain because of how far they're developed in the birthing process, the state has a legitimate compelling interest to regulate abortion at that period. And the exceptions we have in this legislation are for the life of the mother and for rape and incest pregnancies. So we'd be basically backing up the 24-week partial birth abortion ban. But unlike partial birth abortion, it bans abortions when the child is partially born. This would stop aborting a fetus at the 20-week period because the child is so far along, they feel pain. And again, America has to do some soul searching here. If doctors and healthcare professionals are asking you to sing to your child because they can hear your voice and like the sound of it, should we speak up as a nation? Not singing, because I would run everybody out of this room, but through legislation. I welcome this debate. This is what democracies are all about. When do you become who you are? When do you have a soul if you think you have one? These are questions very worthy of a great democracy. And I've tried to marry this bill up with an idea by my friend Senator Blumenthal. He has legislation called the Women's Health Protection Act of 2013. And he introduced the bill saying every senator should be on the record when it comes to this legislation. He has 33 co-sponsors. It would make it illegal almost all of the nearly 200 laws regulating abortion that have been acted at the state level since 2011 would be overturned. This is a wholesale assault on abortion legislation at the state level. He's a fine man. We have a different view. I am not asking him to abandon his philosophy or his view of this issue. I'm asking him and the other Democratic friends to debate his view versus mine and ours and see where the votes come out. And unfortunately today, the request to set a time to debate both bills in a very, I think, professional fashion was denied. Bottom line, we're not going away. May 13th, if we're all still living and around, next year, if nothing has happened, we'll be back. And we'll keep coming back, and we'll keep coming back until the Senate responds to our request to have a debate that I think would be worthy of a great democracy, that would be worthy of having, and try to convince the American people that there comes a time and place for you to speak and for you to act, that we do have a conscience as a nation, and at the 20-week period of the birthing process, that is the time for all of us to stand together. I am confident a strong majority of Americans would support the legislation that would restrict abortion at this phase of the birthing process 5 months, because the baby is very much alive, can feel pain, and if left and treated well, will become a member of society without any debate as to whether or not you belong. Our view is at 20 weeks you're already a member of society and you need our help, and we're here to provide it. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. I'm Marjorie Dannenfeld, president of the Susan B. Anthony List, which I failed to introduce myself. More important, I want to introduce you to the women behind me who lead with me. I call this crowd the dream team of the pro-life movement, and it really is true. They represent the grassroots, the electoral, the legislative, the intellectual, legal arms of the movement. They are always to be feared in any arena in which they engage in the most beautiful way. I just want to introduce you to them, and each of them will come up with a 2-minute sub-statement. First will be National Right to Life President Carol Tobias. Next will be Allison Howard, Communications Director for Concerned Women for America. Irina Grosu is Director of the Center for Human Dignity at Family Research Council. Maureen Ferguson is the Senior Policy Advisor for the Catholic Association. Janine Maxon is the VP for External Affairs at Americans United for Life. So in that order, ladies, I invite you to come up.
Good afternoon. I am Carol Tobias, President of the National Right to Life Committee. When the Supreme Court handed down Roe v. Wade in 1973, our understanding of the development of the capacity to experience pain was so rudimentary that even newborn babies were operated on without anesthesia, only a paralytic to keep them still. We now know better. Yet, despite substantial medical evidence that unborn children are capable of experiencing pain by at least 20 weeks post-fertilization, late abortions still occur on a regular basis in the United States. Abortions performed at this stage of pregnancy use a variety of techniques, including a method in which the unborn child's arms and legs are twisted off by brute manual force, using a long stainless steel clamping tool. We are proud to join with Senator Lindsey Graham, Republican leader Mitch McConnell, and others in calling on Senate Democratic leader Reid to allow the Senate to vote on the Pain-Capable Unborn Child Protection Act. Senator Graham has made a bold proposal that Majority Leader Reid schedule side-by-side votes on the Pain-Capable Unborn Child Protection Act and on S-1696, the so-called Women's Health Protection Act, introduced by Senator Richard Blumenthal. The Blumenthal legislation, if enacted and upheld by the federal courts, would invalidate nearly all state limitations on abortion, including waiting periods, women's right to know laws, and laws providing for meaningful monitoring of abortion-providing facilities, which in many states have long operated with virtually no regulatory oversight. The Blumenthal bill would effectively leave women at the unregulated mercy of the most incompetent, mercenary, and biased abortion practitioners. The Blumenthal bill would also invalidate the Pain-Capable Unborn Child Protection laws enacted by 10 states and further would require all states to allow abortion even during the final 3 months of pregnancy based on an abortionist's claim of health benefits, which Senator Blumenthal acknowledged includes claims based on emotional and psychological health. In short, under this bill, the unborn child would have no more rights from conception until birth than a malignant tumor. This is an extreme pro-abortion ideology far removed from the views of the majority of Americans. Yet in Congress, this can hardly be dismissed as fringe legislation. 34 senators have co-sponsored the Blumenthal bill, and in the House of Representatives, a companion bill has 111 sponsors. NARAL, Planned Parenthood, and the Center for Reproductive Rights have proclaimed that the Blumenthal legislation incorporates their public policy vision for the United States and is a top priority for their organizations. In a fundraising solicitation on the new bill last November, Nancy Northup, president of the Center for Reproductive Rights, said, "It's become crystal clear that we need to go on the offensive." In an interview with Roll Call, Senator Blumenthal said, "As the election approaches, I think the voters are going to want to know where legislators stand on these issues." We agree. Senator Graham's and Senator Blumenthal's bills propose starkly different policy visions for our country. By all means, let voters see where the legislators stand. We call for votes on both bills, having a side-by-side, clean up or down vote on each measure. If Majority Leader Reid declines to accept Senator Graham's proposal, you can take that as clear evidence that despite all the bold statements from the pro-abortion advocacy groups about going on the offensive, and the statement from Senator Blumenthal about the importance of finding out where all legislators stand on these issues, the architects of the Blumenthal bill, in reality, intended only to serve as fodder for fundraising, for appeals to the gullible, and it appears after today's exchange on the Senate floor that they have no intention of having a Democrat-controlled Senate even vote on it. Thank you.
Good afternoon, and thank you for being here. I'm Allison Howard, Communications Director of Concerned Women for America, the nation's largest public policy women's organization. We have over 500,000 members nationwide and 23 Young Women for America chapters on college campuses. As a young woman, I'm happy to be here and happy to stand for this bill and for life today. As Marjorie said so well, Alice Paul said abortion is the ultimate exploitation of women. The fear of this legislative issue somehow damaging political careers is no excuse to ignore the voice of the American people. Polling from Quinnipiac and others shows that 62% support legislation protecting unborn babies beginning at 20 weeks. In study after study, a plurality or majority of Americans support limiting abortion after 20 weeks. And in fact, I'd like to highlight, more highly supported by women than men in those studies. We saw last year a liberal media refuse to discuss the truth of the atrocities that happened in the Gosnell situation in Philadelphia. And with all due respect to Senator Blumenthal, it is reckless and irresponsible to say that what happened in Philadelphia was a lone wolf and does not happen elsewhere. It is highly documented. And thank you to groups like Live Action that have done such a great job of exposing what happens when America's eye turns from what's really happening inside these clinics. A year later, we stand here to grant another opportunity to rectify the wrong done in Philadelphia and elsewhere. We cannot neglect the hard questions. I ask you, as fair-minded journalists, to get past the politics and get down to the principles of what we're calling for and what this bill does. The core tenets of this bill are this. Does a child at 5 months, with a beating heart, with eyelashes, eyebrows, fingernails, and the ability to hear its mother and father's voice, deserve our protection? I say yes, and I hope you do too. It is short time that the law reflects reality and that public policy lines up with what we've come to know in the years since Roe v. Wade. In fact, I'd like to highlight that Concerned Women for America ran a focus group among diverse women and a majority said that they supported common sense regulations like this 20-week bill. When explained what happened, it is clear how women and men fall on this issue. It is also clear that the abortion industry's safe, legal, and rare propaganda has caused and allowed people to ignore the testimonies of unsafe abortion clinics, botched procedures, and the exploitation of very vulnerable women. There is a compelling governmental interest in protecting the lives of unborn children, beginning at the very least from the stage in which they can feel pain. The evidence given by former employees of these clinics, coupled with investigative reports, show very clearly that we must shake Washington and Americans out of their collective apathy on this issue. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Senator Graham, Senator McConnell, and fellow advocates for life. I thank you for taking a stance on this important issue. My name is Irina Grosso, and I'm the director for the Center for Human Dignity with Family Research Council. 1 year ago today, abortionist Kermit Gosnell was convicted of 3 counts of first-degree murder and 21 felony counts of illegal late abortion. The babies that Gosnell brutally killed outside the womb felt pain. Millions of late-term babies are at risk of currently being aborted and will experience the same excruciating pain while still in the womb. On behalf of the Family Research Council and the families we represent, I urge Senate Majority Leader Reid to allow a vote on the Pain-Capable Unborn Child Protection Act. This bill prohibits late abortion of pain-capable unborn babies after 20 weeks post-fertilization. I am standing here today to share with you what embryology textbooks and peer-reviewed scientific studies have unequivocally proven. Babies at 20 weeks post-fertilization can perceive pain. This is a matter of biology, not a matter of belief or wishful thinking. Doctors routinely administer anesthesia for in utero surgeries of babies at 20 weeks post-fertilization. Why would medical textbooks and professional anesthesiologists already have come to a general consensus that fetal anesthesia and analgesia are warranted for fetal surgical procedures, were it not for the presence and experience of pain in these tiniest of patients? Unborn babies 20 weeks post-fertilization have a heightened sense of pain. Between 20 and 30 weeks post-fertilization, an unborn child has more pain receptors per square inch than at any other time in his or her life, with only a very thin layer of skin for protection, leaving nerve fibers closer to the surface. Mechanisms that inhibit or moderate the experience of pain do not begin to develop until week 32 post-fertilization. Any pain of the unborn child experiences is likely more intense than the pain of an older infant or that an adult experiences when subjected to similar types of injury. The American people are with us. A January 2014 Marist poll found that 84% of Americans believe abortion should be restricted within the first 3 months of pregnancy in cases of rape, incest, or to save the life of the mother, or never allowed at all. It is barbaric and cruel to expose unborn children 20 weeks post-fertilization and older to a procedure that causes severe pain. I urge Senator Reid to bring the Pain-Capable Unborn Child Protection Act to the floor for a vote. These unborn babies deserve no less. Thank you.
I'm Maureen Ferguson with the Catholic Association, and I'd just like to briefly address the arguments made by the abortion lobby in opposition to this bill. But first, there is something that both sides essentially agree on in the context of late-term abortion, and that is we're talking about a baby. No one is still pretending that the baby at this stage is just a clump of cells. This fact is obvious in the larger culture all around us as well. Time magazine's Year in Pictures highlighted this fact, showing these new 4D ultrasounds of babies in utero. The popular website WebMD tells us that by 20 weeks, quote, the baby can suck a thumb, yawn, and make faces. Your baby can hear sounds by now, as we've heard. Your voice, as well as sounds outside your body. It will cover its ears with its hands if a loud sound is made near you, and it may even become startled and jump. Yet the abortion lobby finds science very inconvenient at this point and argues that babies at 20 weeks, well, they can't quite really feel pain yet. Well, the classic pregnancy book, What to Expect When Expecting, says that by 18 weeks, the baby's nervous system is in working order. And there is abundant scientific evidence and common sense that tell us that babies at this stage are capable of pain. And you know, even if this were not the case, it's pretty feeble justification for standard late-term abortion techniques, which involve literally dismembering a baby or injecting poison into that small but steadily beating heart. Next, the abortion lobby argues that late-term abortions are rare and that Dr. Gosnell was just an isolated outlier. Well, according to their own statistics, there are about 140 abortion doctors who do abortions past 20 weeks, and at least 18,000 abortions annually past 20 weeks. So Gosnell's clinic may be shut down now, but on the other side of Philadelphia, there's another clinic open right now that advertises dismemberment abortions up to 24 weeks and 6 days, pushing right up against Pennsylvania's 24-week limit. Right across the river in New Jersey, you can do a quick Google search and find 7 clinics that do late-term abortions. Rare? Hardly. Next, media-savvy pro-choice groups argue that these late abortions are primarily the very tragic cases. But the abortionists themselves have admitted that the majority are purely elective. In fact, the last time Congress considered the issue of late-term abortion, Ron Fitzsimmons, who was then the head of the National Coalition of Abortion Providers, the trade group of abortionists, he confessed that he, quote, lied through his teeth when he claimed that the majority of late abortions involve health complications. He admitted that the vast majority are done on healthy mothers carrying healthy babies. Lastly, it's argued that abortion is a necessary option for those very rare cases in which there is a devastating diagnosis. And my heart goes out to those families. My first child was diagnosed in utero with choroid plexus cysts in his brain, which is a condition associated with trisomy 18. They know a lot more about it now than they did back then. But women who are offered abortion in this situation are being offered a lie. They're told this is a compassionate choice. But the reality of abortion, however, is a premature and violent end for the baby. The alternative is authentically compassionate. There is hospice care for these disabled babies that help grieving parents to say goodbye in a loving, humane way after birth, which is also safer for the mother at this stage of pregnancy. Surely a country that passed the Americans with Disabilities Act can choose compassion for our most vulnerable, disabled little ones. So none of the abortion lobby's objections to this bill hold up under the mildest of scrutiny. Protecting unborn babies who can feel pain is common sense, humane, and long overdue. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Janine Maxon, Vice President of External Affairs and an attorney for Americans United for Life, the legal architects of the pro-life movement. Just a little over a year ago, I sat in a courtroom in Philadelphia and watched the trial of late-term abortionist Kermit Gosnell. After hearing mounds of evidence of babies born alive during abortion and then killed, as well as women like Karda Maya Mongor, who survived 20 years in a refugee camp in Baton, only to walk into Gosnell's clinic and leave in an ambulance and later die, I watched Gosnell smirk as a prosecutor asked him the question we were all thinking: are you even human? Now, while we rejoice 1 year later at the conviction that the jury of Gosnell's peers handed down, we do realize too that Gosnell is not an aberration, that atrocities like what happened in Gosnell's House of Horrors clinic occur across the United States every year. And this piece of common sense legislation today that limits abortion at 20 weeks is best both for children as well as for women. In an increasingly health-conscious society, we have to ask ourselves a question: why doesn't abortion come with a warning label? Numerous studies in peer-reviewed medical journals document that abortion poses serious medical risk for women. We know that the later in pregnancy that an abortion occurs, the more dangerous the risk is for women. In fact, a woman seeking an abortion at 20 weeks, which is 5 months of pregnancy, is 35 times more likely to die from abortion than if she had had the abortion in her first trimester. At 21 weeks or more, she is 91 times more likely to die than if she had had the abortion in her first trimester. And as Senator Graham has pointed out, our current abortion policies are radically out of line with the abortion policies of the rest of the world. In fact, the United States is one of only 4 nations in this entire world of 195 nations that allows abortion during all 9 months of pregnancy for any reason, including sex selection, and oftentimes subsidized with taxpayer monies. Americans United for Life strongly supports efforts to limit dangerous late-term abortion procedures given the health risks to both mother and the child, and urges Congress to protect taxpayers whose First Amendment conscience rights would be violated should they be forced to pay for abortions. We commend Senator Graham and everyone who has moved forward with this effort. Thank you so much.
Thank you, team and Senator. We'd be happy to field some questions. Could you identify yourself?
Yes, Senator. Of the 40 co-sponsors, or 39 co-sponsors?
40, yeah.
40 total. How many Democrats do you have?
None. We've talked to a couple of Democrats who I'm very confident would vote on the legislation if we brought it to the floor. And that's a very good question. I'm not asking people to agree with me. I'm asking people to disagree with me in a public forum, have a debate and vote. But I am confident that there's bipartisan support for this legislation. I'm not so sure about Senator Blumenthal's legislation, but time will only tell, and we'll never know unless we have a vote.
And another question, if you don't mind?
Sure.
Because I don't know the answer. What's the situation in the House? Is
It's
there any
passed twice in the House, right?
Path was annually this session.
Okay, this bill, a very similar bill, passed in the House. They had a vote, they had a debate, and passed.
Did that pass with bipartisan support? Do you know offhand?
She's the vote counter, yes.
Okay.
I never cross-marked her, yes. Yes, sir.
Dan Roberts from The Guardian. I just wondered if you could explain to us a bit more clearly the link with the Gosnell case, which you've all mentioned today. If he was successfully prosecuted under the current law, what relevance does it have to this new proposal?
I think the link is that what he was doing, he wound up being convicted for 3 murders. The abortions going on in that clinic just were a chamber of horrors. And it's a reminder that this issue needs to be addressed in a rational way. And we don't need this legislation to have convicted him. Here's the question. Should we be allowing abortions at the 20-week period? If people are upset about what Mr. Gosnell did, and most people are, well then let's do something about it. Let's just don't say we're upset. Putting one man in jail doesn't solve the problem. The problem is at this stage in the pregnancy, our nation is an outlier when it comes to the world, and we're trying to give the unborn child some, I think, rational relief from abortion. And the Gosnell trial is something that unites us all. I've heard no one to defend this guy, but putting him in jail doesn't stop the problem. It highlights the need for the legislative bodies of this country, particularly the Congress to act.
And again, there are many states that have no late term restriction whatsoever, and certainly not at 20, only 13.
You know, there's an interesting, the more people talk about this and understand what we're trying to do, we're winning this debate fairly overwhelmingly in terms of what people think is reasonable. When you ask the average person in America, would you be comfortable with the idea of the law protecting an unborn child at 20 weeks that clearly feels pain, if you're operating on the child to save its life or to improve its quality of health in the birthing process, you have to administer anesthesia, do you think that's the type of situation we should be regulating abortion? And most people say yes. And when you let them know there's a rape incest exception, a life of the mother exception, well defined, not just anything, anytime, most people agree that makes sense, because we're telling young parents something I think is pretty compelling about the child. Sing to the child. Maybe I'm just overdoing this a little bit, but not in my own mind. I just can't imagine medical bodies saying you need to talk to the child, they like hearing your voice, and the government standing by as 18,000 abortions occurred. That's just not right. And if we could ever have this debate, we'll win. It took a long time to get the partial birth abortion debate to the Senate, to the House, and to the courts. It was time well spent. This 18,000 is no small thing if you're one of the 18,000. Thank you.
Is that it? Jason Calvi with EWTN. Senator, can you talk a little bit about the science behind the 20 and the fact that, or the debate, if they can feel pain?
Well, that's why who was our science lady? Okay, she, from what I've been told, and I'm not a doctor, Tom Coburn validates this, but if the science, we're saying at this point in time, standard medical practice is if you're going to operate on the baby, provide anesthesia, because she so eloquently described the ability to feel pain, and I'll turn it over to her. If that's not right, this is why you have debates. Take us on, prove us wrong. Say that's not right, let's have an honest, open debate. It makes sense to me because the doctors I've talked to say yes, they definitely can feel pain at this point in time. And if most of the world outlaws abortions at this point, there's got to be a reason. I think the reason is the child is so far down the road of being born, this is not the right thing to do, but I'll turn it over to you.
Just to answer your question, first of all, there are some fetal pain brochures on the chairs with this information as well. But at 8 weeks post-fertilization, 8 weeks is when motor reflexes are in place, and a child at 8 weeks will avoid a needle, an invasive procedure, so even at 8 weeks. But by 18 weeks, the thalamus and the cortex have developed enough, and I actually have a quote here. So connections between the spinal cord and the thalamus, the region of the brain associated with pain perception in both the unborn child and the adult, begin to form around 12 weeks and are completed by 18 weeks post-fertilization. So by us saying, let's set up legislation at 20 weeks post-fertilization, we're actually being generous. By 18 weeks post-fertilization, these children have completed complete pain perception. And this is the way that we perceive pain. It's not just a motor reflex. The motor reflex is at 8 weeks post-fertilization. Pain perception is at 18 weeks post-fertilization.
And just one, not being a doctor, this is why when you make a D in science, you get the Senate. So I've met 2 people that were born that are alive today. They're twins that were delivered at 20 weeks and survived. So that says a lot about the stage of development, I think. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.